My name is Charlotte and I'm from London in the UK, and today I wanted to talk about a bit more about paper making. I've been doing a bit more of experimenting in the last couple days, and I have been updating or tweaking my process since the last time I did a follow-on walkthrough video, which I'll link here, which is where I kind of showed the whole process of how to make your own kind of recycled craft paper. And I've been, continuing that, but watching a couple more videos, reading some more articles online to try and optimize my process. And yeah, today I wanted to go through a couple of the extra lessons learned, tips and tricks that I've incorporated, which have really made a lot of difference actually in the final finish, the final quality of the paper. So the first thing I want to talk about is the actual dunking part, where you put your mesh frame, your mold into the water with the paper mache and you bring it out and you shake it around. That part of the process I've tweaked slightly. So in the past I've seen most people in their videos, they will fill their whole vat, their container, full of paper pulp mixed with water to a consistency or a density that's enough that you can just put your frame in, dunk it in and lift it out. And then you try to keep that consistency in the whole container. So you're just, you're putting it in at the 45-degree angle and lifting it out. My personal issues with that is that you need to have quite a lot of paper pulp in your container. Depending on the size of your container, it needs to be at least bigger than your frame. But you end up having to do adding a lot of pulp before you even can get a density that you can work with. And there'll end up being quite a lot of wasted pulp that becomes too thin for the container that it's in the end, and then you can throw it away. So what I do instead, which is how I originally started with my process, is I fill the vat with just water, just enough so that it's dunkable. And then I get a decal, which is the part above the frame that sits on top of the frame that's higher. So I have this cardboard, I have this old wine box that actually is this high, and it's kind of a box. I put that on top of the frame, and instead of putting the pulp into the container and mixing it all around, I put the frame and the decal in first, and then I pour the pulp into that section, that A4, because mine's A4 section of frame and decal, and then I mix it around within the frame. So all the pulp gets contained within the actual frame that you're going to lift up. So there is some loss into the container where it seeps through because my decal is not perfectly in line with the frame. There's some holes, and so the paper can slip out. So that is something that I need to try and upgrade still. But it contains the pulp much better, so I can really get started straight away with making the pulp and then putting it in and bringing it out. So I prefer that method overall. There is some loss at the end, but I find it easier to then control the amount of pulp that you're putting into each page, and you have a bit more leniency in experimenting with different colors in the same session because you're pouring the pulp directly into the mold. So if you put everything in one big vat, if you have different colors of pages, everything will be kind of one color, and you won't be able to get different types of colors because everything's mixed. And here I've got a green, a yellowish, I had a brown, and I had a white, kind of all in the same session. So I do prefer that. So kind of containing the pulp into just the frame that you're going to be lifting out of the water. That's one thing that I've decided is for me. The other thing I've learned recently is, and this part is trickier, but when you take the frame out of the water and you put it onto your couch, your sheet of drying fabric, you instead of peeling it, you want to get the frame off the paper, and the paper will then stick to the couch. and peeling it slowly, and that part is the hardest part of the making process. I've seen them try to do, some people do like a sudden motion upwards, like a shock, to separate the page from the frame. Just quickly lift it up and everything should stick on the couch. This works sometimes. I do a mix of kind of shocking it up and then making sure everything comes with it, and if not, trying again. So this whole like quick lift is a good tip and is worth trying and experimenting with. It really depends, I find, on how thick the page is, but that is something, yeah, that I've been trying new as well. The third thing, which has been the biggest revolutionary thing for me, is the drying process. Once you have it on your towel, what I used to do was I just collecting loads of these couch towels and just placing them all over my living room and on any surface to dry on top of the towel. And so you need as many towels if you have pages, and quite often I just run out of towels, and then and these are kitchen towels. And then that's it. I have to stop my paper making session. And then once they dry on the surface, they take a bit longer to dry because they're drying on top of a wet fabric that is damp. And because of that, and because of the drying process, as with most pages, they'll curl a bit and shrink a bit. But you can dry them on a window pane. Directly take your paper with a towel, push it against a window pane, and then you can, and it will attach quite nicely to the window, and then you peel the towel back, and then it's just left with the paper sticking on the window. And the good things about this is, A, because it's sticking to this window pane, it really attaches itself to it. When it dries, it actually doesn't shrink as much, and it doesn't curl up as much. So it's a much flatter piece of paper in the drying process because it's just stuck against this pane. That's great. The second thing is, when it's on the pane, you can then press it a little bit more on the pane, maybe with a sponge, or I might try experiment with some harder tools, maybe roll it a little bit, but pressing onto the pane, onto a really smooth surface, really smooths out the page, because you get all these bumps, you get the relief of the wire mesh from the frame when you take the paper out and put it onto a towel. But then when you press it, especially on a window pane, it smooths out the page so much, and you get such a better quality finish. It's quite amazing. You can see, and I'm not perfect at it yet. This page turned out really well. This was one of my first pages I did in the session, and it was white, so I just used some white old paper. You can see, and I still have room to improve, but you can see that, I don't know if you can, but these sections are smooth. Here you can still see some relief of the wire mesh, but much less than other pages that I've done anyway. Where it is smooth though, it's just a lovely piece of paper. So I'm really happy with the way that turned. And on the other side as well, I mean, this side wasn't in contact with the actual paint itself, but with the pressing that I did, sponging it onto the frame, it really just gets such a nice smooth color. And the smoother the paper, you want smooth paper really, because it will make writing on it so much easier. It's so hard to write on a rough, scratchy, bumpy paper. Even if it's craft paper, and that's kind of you kind of want some, some uniqueness, some relief. It is nicer to have smooth paper. So that's been massive. The other bonus is that it actually dries a lot quicker. So it's facing on the window pane, and if the sun's coming into the window, it can dry much quicker. So on a paper towel, on a normal towel, it would take at least 12 to 24 hours to dry. And even then, some of the towels would take longer. But on the window, after 4 or 5 hours, they're getting a good dryness. I still leave them overnight until the next morning to really make sure they're fully dry. I would, no matter what, wait until they're kind of bone dry. And that just takes overnight, and then they're all perfect. And then you peel them off the window frame, and this is really satisfying. And it's the page is surprisingly well, strongly attached to the paint, but you can peel it off nicely. It doesn't break as long as you have your edges. If you have kind of cracks in your edges, you have to be careful when you peel it off to not increase the rip in the page. But oh, it just slides off so nicely. And then you've got the really nice smooth page. So that's been a really big learning. The final learning that I have made recently is, and I had no concept of this before because I haven't really been using my craft paper yet. I've been making paper, but I haven't been using it. I haven't been using it for drawing or for painting or anything like that. I've just been, actually I have done some painting of, what was it? I think it's just acrylic paint, and that seemed to work fine. I haven't really put ink on it. I haven't tried watercolor on it. And apparently you need to size your paper. Sizing is a thing to your paper, which is essentially trying to make it a bit more waterproof, because if you don't, your paper, especially with more inky, watery substances, it will act maybe more like a tissue paper would, so it absorbs all of the ink, all of the water and watercolor. So it acts more like a tissue than a normal piece of paper. So sizing it basically is brushing over with some type of sizing formula liquid to make it more waterproof. So I have two sets of paper here, handmade paper. This one I made a couple of weeks ago, and this was mainly with the Who Gives a Crap toilet paper, and it's this nice purpley color with these flecks in it. This one I made a couple of days ago, and I put in a couple of petals. It has a mix of brown papers. There's a really nice white sheet here, and again some mixing of different pages. And I've treated them separately, so I'm going to talk about sizing the paper, which is when you brush it with something that makes the paper a bit more waterproof. I've sized each page, but I only sized one side of it, and it's a bit of an experiment at this point. But these pages I sized with a mixture of egg whites and vinegar, which I read somewhere in an article that you can do it. The usual way to size paper is, I think you can buy actual sizing formula liquid, and I think it's got some kind of animal product in it. I don't really know what the official sizing product is, but I've been looking for kind of natural homemade alternatives. So I had this egg white solution, and then on these I didn't quite see this exact method, but I kind of had it suggested, is a mixture of, it's basically PVA glue mixed with a bit of water. And so that glue should give it a bit more of a waterproof texture. So I've generally done it on the non-flower side. So I've put it on this side, which is also the side that's smoother, because that was the thing that was sticking to the window pane. This side's a little bit rougher. So you could coat both sides, but for now I'm just kind of experimenting, and I wanted to see what the effects were. So I've just coated one side, and I've got a couple of pens here. I'm not going to try watercolor today, just because I thought this was easier, and yeah, I just wanted to see. This is kind of my first ever experiment with sizing, so just at least want it to work for like a felt tip pen. So I'm pretty sure that the pen and pencil will be fine even on the non-sized paper, but let's see. And then we can experiment with how the felt tip looks like, and maybe if there's other materials. I don't really have an ink pen at home, so I can't test it with that, but that would be a good thing to test it with. So I'm going to get a couple of samples. You can kind of see the streaks of when I brushed it with sizing liquid. This side I did do, this side, I might have done both sides on these. I think on this one I did not do sizing because it was already a bit broken. So I think I'm going to test the sized version and then the non-sized version here, and then, so I think I'll just try this one. So this had the PVA glue. It's dried nicely, so I think I did about half mixture. Obviously you're always pressing it flat again. This side is definitely the rougher side, but it feels like great paper, to be honest. So I'm just gonna write on top of each of these pages, somewhere in the corner. Start with a pen. Test. That looks all right. So, also with this version, the one I did a couple of days ago, I really focused on pressing it against the window pane to try and make it as flat as possible. These ones are bumpier because I didn't know about this whole flattening. So, and it's definitely a difference in like how it feels to write on if it is bumpy. So really, you want to get it flat, and I'm going to keep on, and this is, it's actually really worked out very well. All the mesh bumps have kind of come out here, which is really nice. And I'm going to keep on working to try and flatten it. They also say you can properly press it before when it's still damp. I need to figure out more experiments with it, but this was the unsized version. It definitely feels a bit more it kind of goes into the page, is less it feels a little bit less strong. I mean, this is also a thinner sheet a little bit. Let's see, test on this one. I would say it's quite hard with pens if you have to press hard on the page, because the page is quite soft. It's a bit harder. Okay, I mean, I wasn't expecting too much from the pen and the pencil, but let's see. It's fine. I don't even think that the sizing does much, to be honest. Okay, yes. I do see a difference. Right. So we're going to go, I'm going to hold these up. So unsized, egg white size, and PVA size. I think the PVA is going to be the most waterproof because it is an actual like glue. PVA is pretty waterproof material. You can really see the difference of the unsized versus the sized PVA there. I do think there's a lot more absorption coming in the unsized one, so it's definitely worth sizing it to some extent. And I think this one looks all right, but the best result is this, but it also could be attributed to the fact that this page is smoother. This has a lot more bumps. So that relief could maybe, I don't know, cause a bit more absorption. But I think, I mean, going forward, I'm going to smooth out all my pages more, but I'm going to experiment a little bit more with the egg white because it is the natural material. I would prefer it in the long run over using the PVA glue, but the PVA glue has worked really well and it is pretty inexpensive material. So yeah, I think that was a good test. Obviously, I'm not sure how it would work with watercolor. It might be worth experimenting with that. It's worth experimenting, yeah, with all these different techniques. I'm very happy with the latest batch of paper. It came out really well. And yeah. So yeah, I hope you found that a bit informative. I don't know if anyone's trying to make their own paper. It's super easy and there's only a couple of materials that you need to get started and it's really fun. It's quite fun collecting all your paper from envelopes and things like that. I would recommend the best paper to save would be white paper. The brown paper that comes in like packaging boxes, it's a bit trickier, it's a bit thicker, it doesn't come out as nice, I find. Depends if you like it. It does come out well if you mix it with a lot of flowers. I would say that if you are adding petals and experimenting with adding petals. I would say this, it depends on the effect, but the smaller the petals, the easier, the better. These ones, I'm not so happy with these bigger ones. It will become, this will be hard to actually write on. If you write on this side of the surface, the petals are really there for decoration. They're not very practical if you want to write it, but it does look nice. But I prefer at this point some smaller petals like this. You've got some small leaves as well, which they stick on better. So these at some point, if I bend the page or something, these might actually just peel off because they literally just sat in that page. So the smaller, the thinner the petals, the better. And any color works really, but I do, the 2 white pages I did, this one I did the first one without any petals, and that, it's just such a nice, I don't make a lot of white paper. It's just so nice. I really came out well. And then this one is the other white one, but then I added some petals, and again, I really liked it. I really liked the way these things came out. I trimmed the edges as well, just to make it a bit more neat around the edges, and then I'll often cut it in half to make it A5. But it's slightly smaller than A5 because I've trimmed. But then, yeah, you've got these A5 pages. But I might leave it as A4 for now, and eventually I'll find a use for all these papers. So this was on the latest batch, and then the batch that I'd done was all this kind of purple flecky material. It all turned out well, but I'm just gonna start collecting all these pages, and at some point I might make a book out of it. At some point I might do something with it. They're quite good gifts as well. And I really enjoy doing it. So I'm just gonna keep saving paper. I'm gonna keep making more. I still have a lot of like dried petals that I could be using up. And it's just really satisfying to do. They're great for Christmas cards. So last Christmas I used a lot of these actually. And even the thicker ones, if you do have brown paper, like this page turned out really thick. They're actually quite good. I made little boxes out of it. You can fold it, origami it into a little box, and then you can put little treats in it. So, I mean, for like Christmas. That's what I did last year. So it's always a good thing to save for. And that was all I wanted to say. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative. If you like it, let me know. I'm really into paper making at the moment, and I'm going to keep doing more and keep learning more, and I'll let you know, how I go and what other things I learn about it. One of the next upgrades I want to do, one is make the decal that I have more watertight with the frame, because there's a lot of holes in it. I also have this desire to go A3 size. I have 2 A3 frames actually that I could use, and then I just put a mesh on top of it, but I don't have a container big enough to dunk in the A3, so I need some kind of like a big vat, but like it doesn't have to be tall, it just needs to be wide enough to be able to do that. I just have this fantasy of doing it with A3 pages, but that would require quite a lot of paper, quite a lot of pulp for each one, and I actually don't have a window pane that's big enough. I think you could put it on like I have these more glassy kitchen cabinets. You can experiment. It just needs to be some kind of smooth, cold surface, I think, that it can attach to. I'd love to make A3 because then I can, just to make bigger pages. Why not? So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.